Welcome, dear learners. In this lecture, we are going to deal with the domain of the profane. Dear learners, we propose to make an analytical distinction between two conceptual dichotomies that have become confused in religious studies and the humanities more widely. It is frequently assumed that religion is the province of the sacred. This domain is then taken to be in contrast to or in opposition to the secular, which is further identified with the profane. Religion and the sacred are further identified with the religious institution and with ritual, whereas the secular and profane are identified with the state or politics and with technical practices. In this way, two great binaries are assumed. These pairs are often further reinforced by identifying the sacred and the religious with things set apart, with the other world or with the supernatural. This is typically constructed in opposition to the secular and profane as the ordinary things of this world or the natural. In the following, how this pair concept is treated in some literature on religion and discuss or comment mainly on its sociological bearings. Especially, we will see how it is utilized by Emil Durkheim, Bronislaw Malinowski and Mircea Eliot, to all of whom it is of central concern. Let us start with Durkheim. Emil Durkheim and profane. After having discarded the views that religion cannot be primarily concerned with the ideas of supernatural or with beliefs spiritual beings, Durkheim establishes a preliminary definition of religion. Religion consists, he says, of two fundamental categories, beliefs and rites, in other words, states of mind and specific ways of behavior. Because it is beliefs that determine the objective of the practices, beliefs have to be defined first. It is mentioned that one common characteristic of all beliefs is that they assume a classification of all things, real and spiritual, into two opposed categories, the profane and the sacred. Beliefs as expressed in myths and the like are also important for other reasons. They determine not only what objects will be considered as sacred, but also the specific nature, characteristics, virtues, etc. of these objects. The nature of sacred things is rather complex. All sacred things, not all of the same quality, are thought to be superior to things profane and radically opposed to later. From our summary of Durkheim's argument, it will be clear that his rallying point is the explanation of the human forces that are responsible for religion in general and for the opposition of the sacred and the profane in particular. Those human forces, Durkheim concluded, are social forces, whether they are related either to the religious functions or to the social functions of totemism. If Durkheim's study implied only propositions like these, most people would agree with him, especially in our present time. Indeed, it can be said that, for instance, it has become a truism in sociology that religion has been possible in and through society. It only amounts to the statement that religion is a social phenomenon. However, this is still far removed from saying that all religious meanings can be reduced to social significance. In other words, the meaning of the sacred and the profane remains a problem as well as their relationship. Durkheim's main concern, being a functionalist, was stability and presence of stability in the society. Therefore, he was concerned with the integration and henceforth religion because it in a way integrates society. His work, The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, was published in 1912. In his work, he develops a sociological theory of religion. Durkheim tries to figure out where religion comes from and why it exists as a permanent and essential aspect of human life. He sought the origin of religion in society rather than in the minds of individuals. He evaluated that the social existence of an individual determines its social consciousness. Durkheim's main interest was the ways in which society is bound together and investigated the role of religion in keeping society together. He thought the model for the relationship between people and the supernatural was the relationship between individuals and the community. For him, religion is a group phenomenon, and the group gives religion its specific character and unity. On the other hand, religion unifies the group and binds people together. Thus, he continuously argues that religious ideas are derived from society and serve to bind the members of the society together. According to Durkheim, religion is not whole but consists of parts. These parts include a complex system of myths, dogmas, rites, and ceremonies. All these operate as an invisible entity. To understand religion in relation to parts and whole, scientific method is required. Now we will move to the Bronislaw Malinowski and his ideas about profane. A more convincing argument brought up by Bronislaw Malinowski against Durkheim is that the latter mainly studied the seasonal ceremonies of the primitives and much less other forms of collective life. Collective effervescence or heightening of emotions also occurs in profane events such as battles, tribal gatherings for trading purposes, etc. Yet no religion is generated on any of these occasions. Consequently, it may be more correct to say that Durkheim, in spite of concentrating too much on religious events by overlooking other social activities, by the same token underestimated religious events by overemphasizing their social meaning. Anyway, problematic is Durkheim's argument about the relationship of the religious and the non-religious sphere. Durkheim's solution was one of combination and finally of reducing the meaning of the former to that of the latter. Malinowski's view, in contrast, is rather one of separation. Agreeing in principle with Malinowski's vitalistic view of religion, I would like to venture, however, at least one reservation in connection with the articulation of the different areas of activity. Malinowski has outlined so well almost up to the point of sealing them off from one another. How magic and religion result from the complexities of life and from man's effort to overcome his inadequacy and his crisis. All this is well illustrated, but how these areas of the profane, magic and religion do exist side by side, or how they are integrated into one system is not touched upon. In his discussion of profane, work and magic, for instance, Malinowski concludes that the attempts at efficiency through work and knowledge are the dominant tendencies. These tendencies are signs of a scientific way of thinking that in itself is not different from the one in advanced science. They constitute what he calls the profane sphere, which is different from the religious one. As we can see, their relationship remains as unsolved question. Malinowski stressed the significance of comprehending the function of religion and the ordinary aspects of life within the framework of daily existence. He contended religious convictions and ceremonies, including those linked to the mundane, meet pragmatic requirements by offering psychological reassurance, fostering social unity, and establishing a sense of structure amidst uncertainty and unease. Now, the third scholar, Mircea Eliade, and his concept of profane. Now, we will turn our attention to Eliade, historian of religion, who treated the matter extensively in his book, The Sacred and the Profane. Although Eliade's view of the relationship of the sacred and profane resembles that of Durkheim, he provides us with some different aspects of the problem, especially because he treats it in connection with various religions, ancient and modern. Further, Eliot, as already mentioned, treats all the manifestations of the sacred, whether in primitive or modern religion, whether Oriental or Western, as one single category opposed to a similarly homogeneous treatment of the profane in all cultural circumstances. This makes wonder about the value of those concepts of the sacred and the profane, especially if they are interpreted in a Christian way. If Eliot's view of man's religiosity is only by Christian theological thinking, it can only have value as such, not as an empirical generalization we are entitled to expect from any empirical discipline, whether historical or sociological. In order to check on this aspect more carefully, let us follow Eliot's argumentation concerning religious and non-religious experiences of space and time. Consequently, the relationship of the sacred and profane, or better, of sacred and profane awareness is different in every case. This means that the concept of the sacred and the profane as thought of by Durkheim, Malinowski and Eliot is certainly not universally applicable. It is a rather ambiguous concept in need of redefinition. When looking toward an alternative view of the matter, it is not unimportant to ask the question why, after all, religion has been conceived of as the realm of the sacred and everyday life as that of the profane. Classic anthropology is being criticized in recent studies for perpetuating discriminating views between primitive times and modern societies, for the confusion of the sacred and the unclean, for considering ideas concerning pollution as primitive hygiene, for the opposition between ritual and the spiritual religion, between the sacred and the profane. About the latter is mentioned that a total opposition between the sacred and the profane seems to have been a necessary step in Durkheim's theory of social integration. It expressed the opposition between the individual and society. Further, especially James George Fraser is severely criticized and even blamed for isolating and hardening the idea of magic as the efficacy's symbols. Magic, according to Fraser, resulted from early man's inability of distinguishing between his own subjective associations and external objective reality. The social as sacred versus the individual as profane. The contrast between sacred and profane, experienced as a socially generated moral force, is for Durkheim the key to the explanation of where reason, the categories, and hence dualism comes first. Without the contrast between sacred and profane and its enactment by the social group, moral forces could not be felt. The sacred Durkheim identifies with the group, the social, and with moral force. The profane he identifies with the individual, among other things, because collective concepts are shared and transcend that individual. They are assigned by Durkheim to the realm of the sacred and not the profane. Ritual behavior, established or fixed by traditional rules, has been observed the world over and throughout the history. In the study of this behavior, the terms sacred and profane have remained useful in distinguishing ritual behavior from other types of action. For Durkheim and others who use these terms, ritual is a determined mode of action. According to Durkheim, the reference or object of ritual is the belief system of a society, which is constituted by a classification of everything into the two realms of the sacred and the profane. This classification is taken as a universal feature of religion. Belief systems, myths are viewed as expressions of the nature of the sacred realm, in which ritual becomes the determined contact of the individual in a society expressing a relation to the sacred and the profane. The sacred is that aspect of community's beliefs, myths, and sacred objects that is set apart the forbidden. The function of ritual in the community is that of providing the proper rules for action in the realm of the sacred as well as supplying a bridge for passing into the realm of the profane. Although the distinction between the sacred and profane is taken as absolute and universal, there is an almost infinite variation on how this dichotomy is represented not only between cultures but also within a culture. What is profane for one culture may be sacred to another. This may also be true, however, within a culture. The relative nature of things sacred and the proper ritual conducted in relation to the sacred as well as the profane varies according to the status of the participants. What is set apart or holy for a sacred king and priest will differ from the proper ritual of others in the community who are related to them, even though they share the same belief systems. The crucial feature that both sustains these relations and sets their limits is the ritual of initiation. For both Durkheim and Eliot, sacred and profane refer to the way the world is experienced, not to the way the world is. The sacred is contrasted to the profane, but it does not necessarily have need of the divine. One might say that the more religion gains as a structure of power and center of economic interests and socio-political influence, the more the area of the sacred contrasts. The field of the religious and the field of the sacred do not necessarily coincide. The general idea of sacredness has the characteristics such as hierarchy of beings, means objects that are considered as sacred take up a higher position than others, they are given dignity and power. Durkheim equates society with God and gives society the superior position of hierarchy and heterogeneity. Both sacred and profane are opposites of each other. They can't exist together at the same time. Though a profane object can transform into sacred through various rites, this passage from profane to sacred through rites is known as ritual purification. The sacred and profane also have a rivalry between them. Sacred is also considered as better or above profane. According to Durkheim, the main task of religion is to reach the sacred, and a society is connected when its members imagine a sacred world and its relationship to the profane world and then convert this common representation into action and definite practices. Now we will move to the discourses on profane. The sacred profane dichotomy is a basic tenet of Durkheim's approach to the religion. In his view, the sacred is a feature of experience that lies outside of the sphere of the profane. In the same way, the social sphere is separated from the individual one. The transition from the sacred to the profane and vice versa is possible, but entails a radical metamorphosis. In a Durkheimian perspective, the task of religious rites is that of reinforcing this separation, thus averting the collapse of the sacred into the profane. This is also the function of religious prescriptions and taboos as well as of predicaments like purity and pollution as shown by Mary Douglas. Durkheim emphasizes this dichotomy as part of his criticism of 19th century British anthropology, which supported intellectualist and cognitive interpretations of religion and magic. Evolutionist anthropologists such as Taylor and Fraser interpreted rituals as childish and fallacious attempts to explain the world and to exercise control over it. Magic and religion were considered rational in terms of the logical procedures they apply, but mistaken with regard to the achieved results. Ludwig Wittgenstein offers a vivid critique of Fraser's view. He was not interested in elaborating a general anthropological perspective on human culture, but examined Fraser's work as an example of wrong philosophical argumentation. According to Whittington, we cannot reduce the meaning of sophisticated systems of practices and beliefs to analytical mistakes. The mistake instead lies in their interpretation. For instance, in considering rituals as scientific experiments. His comment was that Fraser's explanations of primitive practices are much cruder than the meaning of these practices themselves. To avoid reducing religion to the domain of error was also Durkheim's main goal, pursued by separating the rational grammar of the profane from that of the sacred. One of the questions 19th century anthropologists were concerned with how it is rationally possible to cling to beliefs that are empirically unfounded. However, as in Wittgenstein, so in Durkheim, it appears per se native because it juxtaposes two distinct and incommensurable dimensions of human experience. Indeed, many of Durkheim's followers have stressed the sacred-profane dichotomy. Lucien Lévi-Bruhl, drawing on Durkheim's criticism of 19th century evolutionism, argued that scientific rationality and magical and religious practices are two radical different ways of thinking. Lévi-Bruhl radicalizes the Durkheimian distinction between the sacred and the profane by employing an even sharper division between the domain of rationality, means logical mentality, and mystical participation, philological mentality. By stressing the antinomy between magical and scientific mentality, he degrades rituals as nonsense, is even more categorical than Fraser's. His notion of primitive mentality was conceived in order to advance the comprehension of magical practices. De facto, it reduces magic and religion to irrational and pre-logical practices steeped in supernatural beliefs, impermeable to experiences and unconcerned with the laws of nature. However, this leads Lévi-Bruhl to conclusions radically opposed to those of Durkheim. Now, the symbolistic approach. Magic is a substitute activity that through rituals helps one cope with the anxieties of the human condition. Malinowski's institutions combined with Durkheim's approach led to the development of symbolist perspective. From this perspective, rituals are chiefly, if not exclusively, expressive action that allow people to publicly express values, feelings, notions and rules about society and its institutions. Once again, the main targets are Taylor and Fraser, and their instrumental and cognitive interpretations would neglect the expressive purpose of rites. Rather than scientific speculations or cognitive processes, rituals should be approached as artistic practices such as a theatre and poetry. In the wake of Durkheim's pioneer work, the function of religious and magic rituals is explained in terms of their power to express and validate social views. Most 20th century anthropologists such as Edmund Leach, John Beatty, Evans Pritchard, Mary Douglas adopted a symbolist approach. They saw rituals as powerful, dramatic and expressive practices through which groups and communities preserve and regenerate values and codes. Examples include those pertaining to lineage and generally hierarchy, like social status, political authority, solidarity and conflict. From this perspective, understanding what a rite is entails decoding hidden meanings inaccessible to the consciousness of the social actors themselves. Features of the profane. In the context of sociology of religion, the features of the profane are typically understood in contrast to the sacred. Mundane and everyday. The profane refers to the ordinary, every aspects of life that lack religious or sacred significance. It encompasses the secular realm of human existence and activities that are not directly associated with religious rituals, beliefs and practices. common and accessible. Unlike the sacred, which is often regarded as exclusive or requiring special access or rituals, the profane is accessible to everyone. It does not involve the need for specific qualification, rituals, or religious authority to engage with it. Lack of religious rituals. The profane is characterized by the absence of religious rituals or ceremonial practices. It does not involve the observance of sacred rites, sacrifices, or prescribed forms of worship commonly associated with the religious traditions. Absence of transcendence. While the sacred is often associated with the transcendence and the experience of the divine or supernatural, the profane does not involve such transcendent or supernatural dimensions. It pertains to the immanent and earthly aspects of human life. Contextual and cultural variations. The understanding of the profane can vary across different cultural and social contexts. What is considered profane in the one society or religious traditions may not be perceived as such in another. Norms, values, and cultural frameworks shape the definition and boundaries of the profane. Pragmatic and utilitarian. The profane is often associated with practical, utilitarian concerns of daily life. It encompasses the pursuit of material needs, economic activities, social interactions, and other aspects of human existence that are not directly related to religious or spiritual matters. It's important to note that the features of the profane are not inherently negative or derogatory. Rather, they describe the realm of the secular and ordinary within the study of sociology of religion. Understanding the characteristics of profane helps to establish a contrast and contextualize the significance of the sacred in religious beliefs, rituals, and social systems. It is important to recognize that these features of the profane are shaped by historical, social, and cultural factors as well as individual experiences and regional variations. The profane in this context represents the secular dimensions of encompassing a wide range of everyday activities, cultural practices, and social interactions that are not exclusively tied to religious aspects. In summary, the key difference between the sacred and the profane lies in their association with religious or spiritual significance. The sacred represents the realm of the divine and the holy, while the profane encompasses the realm of the ordinary and secular, devoid of religious or spiritual connotations. Dear learners, I hope you would have enjoyed the lesson on domain of the profane, and we will meet with another schedule. Thank you and all the best.